The sun rose peacefully over the lush valleys of Varion 7, casting long shadows across the fertile fields that had sustained the human colony for 15 years. From his office in the Central Administration Tower, Governor Han Tail gazed out at the thriving settlement he had helped build from nothing. The morning light glinted off the transparent domes of the hydroponics facilities and the silver surfaces of the research laboratories. The colony had grown from a mere outpost of 300 souls to a flourishing community of 15,000. Their success was largely due to the planet's remarkable similarity to Earth: temperate climate, breathable atmosphere, and soil rich in minerals perfect for farming. The colonists had worked hard to establish themselves, turning the wild terrain into productive farmland while maintaining a delicate balance with the native ecosystem. In the xenobiology lab across the colony center, Dr. Kim Neri was running her usual morning diagnostics when an alert flashed across her screen. She blinked, adjusting her glasses as she leaned closer to verify the readings. The long-range scanners had picked up something unusual: multiple large objects moving through space on a direct course toward Varion 7. "This can't be right," she muttered, running the scan again. But the results were the same. Whatever was approaching their colony was massive, and it wasn't following any known human flight patterns. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened a direct channel to the governor's office. Within an hour, the colony's leadership had gathered in the emergency command center. Colonel Park Jae-ho, head of military operations, stood before a holographic display showing the approaching vessels. "Based on their speed and trajectory, they'll reach our orbit in approximately 48 hours, he reported, his face grim. Governor Han studied the projections with concern. "Do we have any idea who they are?" "Nothing matches our database of known human or allied species ships," Dr. Kim answered. "The design is completely foreign to us." The next 2 days were a flurry of activity as the colony prepared for first contact. Defense systems were brought to full readiness, but kept in passive mode to avoid appearing hostile. Colonel Park positioned their limited military forces strategically around the colony's perimeter, while maintaining a visible honor guard at the designated landing zone. When the alien ships finally entered orbit, their size became apparent. Each vessel was nearly 3 times larger than the colony's biggest building. Their hulls were dark and angular, with strange patterns that seemed to shift and move in the sunlight. The first communication came as a burst of data that their computers took several hours to decode. The message was simple. The Kurith, as they called themselves, requested a diplomatic meeting on the surface. Governor Han insisted on leading the welcoming committee himself, despite Colonel Park's objections. They assembled a diverse group, military, scientific, and civilian representatives, to meet the aliens at the designated landing site. The Kurith delegates emerged from their shuttle in environmental suits that made them look like moving shadows. They were tall, nearly 8 feet in height, with movements that seemed almost liquid in their smoothness. The meeting started cordially enough, with basic exchanges of greeting protocols. But things quickly turned sour when the Kurith ambassador spoke their true purpose. "Your colony occupies space claimed by the Kurith Empire. You will surrender control of this world and its resources immediately." Governor Han maintained his composure, though his voice was firm. "Varion 7 is a legally established human colony. We have spent 15 years building our home here. We are willing to discuss trade agreements and peaceful coexistence, but surrender is not an option." The Kurith delegate's response was chilling in its simplicity. "Then you choose extinction." The aliens returned to their shuttle without further discussion. Colonel Park immediately ordered all forces to battle stations, but it was already too late. The moment the Kurith shuttle cleared the atmosphere, their warships opened fire. Commander Lee Dae-sung led the colony's defensive response, but their weapons proved nearly useless. The Kurith ships were protected by energy shields far beyond human technology. Colonial defense batteries fired salvo after salvo, only to watch their shots dissipate harmlessly against the alien barriers. The outlying settlements were hit first. Agricultural outposts and research stations disappeared in blossoming explosions that lit up the horizon. Emergency broadcasts filled the communication channels with desperate calls for help, many cut short mid-transmission. In the colony's main bunker, Governor Han watched in horror as the casualty reports poured in. Over 3,000 colonists dead in the first hour alone. The Kirith methodically destroyed their defensive positions one by one, their weapons cutting through the colony's best shielding like it wasn't even there. Commander Lee's voice crackled over the command channel, thick with frustration and anger. "Sir, we can't even scratch their shields. Our heaviest weapons are having no effect. We need to consider evacuation options." But the Kirith had thought of that too. Their ships had positioned themselves to cut off all escape routes. The colony's remaining ships were destroyed in their hangars before they could launch. The message was clear. There would be no escape from Varion 7. As night fell on that first terrible day, the survivors huddled in underground shelters, listening to the sound of their world being destroyed above them. Governor Han sat in the emergency command center, his face illuminated by the glow of screens showing more and more of the colony turning red, destroyed or occupied by the invaders. Dr. Kim worked frantically to analyze the Kirith technology, hoping to find some weakness they could exploit. But every scan showed the same thing. The aliens were simply too far advanced. Their weapons and defenses operated on principles that human science was only beginning to understand. The colony that had taken 15 years to build was being systematically destroyed in a matter of hours. As the first day of the invasion came to an end, hope seemed lost. But in a secure bunker deep beneath the Colonial Administration building, a desperate plan was about to be set in motion, one that would change the course of the war, and perhaps humanity itself. The emergency bunker was filled with the hum of life support systems and the glow of monitoring screens. 10 hours had passed since the Kirith's first attack, and the colony's situation was growing more desperate by the minute. Dr. Yu Sung-min sat at his workstation, his fingers trembling as he entered the final security code that would unlock files he had hoped would never see the light of day. "What I'm about to show you was supposed to remain buried forever," he said, addressing the small group of military and civilian leaders gathered around him. The screen flickered to life, displaying documents marked with faded, top secret, stamps dating back to the late 20th century. Governor Han leaned forward, his eyes scanning the first page. "Project Berserker. I've never heard of it." "You weren't supposed to," Dr. Yu replied, his voice heavy with the weight of his knowledge. "This was developed during Earth's darkest hours, when we feared extinction from multiple threats. The program created warriors unlike anything seen before or since." The room fell silent as images appeared on the screen. Laboratory footage showing soldiers performing impossible feats of strength and speed. In one clip, a single enhanced soldier lifted a military vehicle over his head. In another, a warrior moved so fast, the camera could barely track her movements. The program succeeded in creating superhuman fighters, Dr. Yu continued. But the cost was terrible. The enhancement process activated dormant genes in human DNA, genes that linked back to our most primitive ancestors. It unleashed something primal, something we had evolved away from millions of years ago. Major Kang Dua, who had been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. His uniform was still stained with blood and dirt from the day's fighting. "How many subjects survived the enhancement?" 70%, Dr. Yu answered. But survival wasn't the main problem. The enhanced soldiers became unstoppable in combat, yes, but they were also unpredictable. The process awakened a berserker rage that was difficult to control. Some subjects never came back from that state of mind. General Choi Won-shik, who had been silently watching the footage, spoke up. "Why wasn't this used during the colonial wars? We lost thousands of good soldiers in those conflicts." "Because the price was too high," Dr. Yu explained. "The enhanced soldiers were effective, but they were also dangerous to everyone around them, friend and foe alike. The program was shut down and buried. I only know about it because I was part of the team studying its long-term effects on the test subjects' descendants. Major Kang stepped into the center of the room. I volunteered to be the first subject. The room erupted in protests, but Kang raised his hand for silence. I fought in 3 colonial wars. I've seen every kind of death there is. What's happening up there right now? He pointed to the ceiling, indicating the surface. That's worse than anything I've ever seen. We're not just losing a battle, we're facing extinction. Dr. Yu shook his head. You don't understand what you're volunteering for. The enhancement process is painful beyond description. And if you survive, you might never be the same person again. Unwilling to take that risk, Kang replied firmly. We've lost over 5,000 colonists today alone. Our weapons are useless against their shields. What choice do we have? General Choi called for an immediate meeting of the military council. For 2 hours, they debated the ethical implications while more reports of destruction poured in from the surface. The Kareth were systematically destroying everything the colony had built, and their ground forces had begun to land. Dr. Kim Nari, who had been analyzing the alien technology, joined the meeting with more bad news. Their ground troops are even more formidable than their ships. Their armor is impenetrable to our weapons, and they're moving to surround the main colony center. The debate grew more heated. Some argued that using the Berserker program would make them no better than their enemies. Others insisted that survival had to come first. They could deal with the moral implications later, if they lived. Finally, Governor Han called for a vote. We're facing the end of everything we've built here. Every minute we debate, more of our people die. I understand the risks, but I see no other choice. We either try this, or we watch our colony die. The vote was unanimous. General Choi signed the authorization, his hand steady despite the weight of his decision. How long will it take to implement the program? Dr. Yu quickly reviewed his files. The enhancement process itself takes 6 hours. We have enough stored materials to enhance up to 50 subjects. But I must warn you again, this will change them forever. And once we start, there's no going back. Major Kang removed his uniform jacket and rolled up his sleeve. Then we better get started. The Kareth aren't going to wait for us to be ready. As Dr. Yu prepared the first injection, the bunker shook with the impact of another bombardment from above. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the lights flickered. The sound of distant explosions served as a constant reminder of what was at stake. This will hurt, Dr. Yu warned, holding the syringe filled with glowing blue liquid. Are you absolutely sure about this? Major Kang's answer was to extend his arm. The needle went in, and the transformation process began. His first scream echoed through the bunker, causing everyone present to flinch. It was just the beginning of a long night that would change the course of the war, and perhaps the future of humanity itself. In the hours that followed, more volunteers came forward as reports of Kareth atrocities continued to pour in. Each of them knew they might be sacrificing their humanity to save what remained of the colony. As dawn approached, the first batch of enhanced soldiers would be ready. The only question was, could they control what they were about to unleash? The underground medical bay echoed with Major Kang's roars of pain. His body twisted on the reinforced medical bed, the restraints creaking under forces they were never designed to withstand. Dr. Yu and his assistant Song Mei worked frantically to monitor his vital signs as the transformation took hold. His heart rate is far beyond human limits, Song Mei called out, her eyes fixed on the medical displays. Temperature rising to 41 degrees Celsius, muscle density increasing exponentially. Major Kang's body was changing before their eyes. His muscles swelled and hardened, veins bulging beneath his skin. The bones in his face shifted, becoming more pronounced, more primitive. His eyes, when they opened, showed enlarged pupils that seemed to swallow the iris entirely. Administering the stabilizing agent, Dr. Yu announced, injecting a green fluid into Kang's IV line. The Major's thrashing gradually subsided, though his breathing remained deep and ragged. In the observation room above, Dr. Kim Neri watched through the reinforced window, recording every detail of the transformation. The brain activity patterns on her screens were unlike anything she had ever seen. Rapid spikes of activity in areas of the brain that were typically dormant in normal humans. 6 hours after the process began, Major Kang spoke his first words. His voice was deeper, rougher than before. I can feel it. The power. The rage. His hands clenched and unclenched, leaving finger-shaped dents in the metal railings of his bed. The next few days saw more volunteers undergo the transformation. Captain Ba Junwoo and his entire squad stepped forward, knowing what awaited them after witnessing Kang's transformation. Each emergence was different, but all shared the same core changes: enhanced strength, speed, and an underlying current of barely contained fury. During their first training session, the changes became even more apparent. Major Kang punched through a solid steel door as if it were made of paper. Captain Ba cleared a 50-meter distance in under 2 seconds. Their reflexes were so enhanced that they could dodge bullets, not that their new, toughened bodies needed to fear small arms fire anymore. But it was the psychological changes that worried Dr. Kim the most. The enhanced soldiers showed increasing signs of aggression. Simple disagreements could trigger dangerous spikes in their adrenaline levels. They spoke less, communicated more through grunts and growls. Their eyes constantly scanned for threats, their bodies tensed for combat even in safe situations. The first real test came when Kareth ground forces breached the colony's outer perimeter. A patrol of 6 alien warriors, each standing over 8 feet tall in their advanced armor, moved through the ruins of what had once been the colony's main agricultural center. Captain Ba led his squad of 5 enhanced soldiers in the first engagement. The security cameras captured what happened next, footage that would later be studied countless times by military analysts. The Berserkers moved with impossible speed, crossing the open ground between buildings faster than the alien warriors could track. The Kareth's energy weapons, which had carved through normal human defenses with ease, barely slowed the enhanced soldiers down. Where the beams struck their skin, it blackened and healed almost instantly. The first Kareth warrior died when Captain Ba literally tore through its supposedly impenetrable armor with his bare hands. The alien's death scream was cut short as Bai reached inside and ripped out vital organs he couldn't even name. The other berserkers showed similar savagery, attacking with a primitive fury that seemed to bypass the alien's advanced technology entirely. In less than 30 seconds, all 6 Kareth warriors lay dead or dying. The enhanced soldiers stood among the carnage, their bodies heaving with exertion and bloodlust. When the recovery team arrived, they found Captain Ba and his squad still in their battle rage, pacing around the bodies of their kills like primitive predators. It took Dr. Yu nearly an hour to talk them down, to help them regain enough humanity to return to base. The success of the engagement was undeniable. They had found a weapon the Kareth weren't prepared for, but the cost to the soldiers' humanity was becoming clearer with each passing hour. In her lab, Dr. Kim reviewed the brain scans taken after the battle. The patterns were disturbing. Entire regions of higher function showing reduced activity, while the primitive centers of the brain blazed with unprecedented levels of activation. The enhanced soldiers were literally devolving during combat, giving in to instincts that modern humans had buried millennia ago. "They're slipping away from us," she reported to Governor Han. "Each time they give in to the battle rage, it becomes harder for them to come back. We're not just changing their bodies, we're unleashing something from our evolutionary past, something our ancestors deliberately suppressed to become civilized." But with the Kareth pushing deeper into the colony every day, there was no time to reconsider their course of action. More volunteers stepped forward, willing to sacrifice their humanity to save what remained of their people. The transformation chamber was never empty, the screams of those undergoing the change becoming a constant background noise in the underground facility. Major Kang, when not in combat, spent long hours staring at his reflection, touching his changed face, as if trying to recognize the person he used to be. The hardest part, He told Dr. Yu during one of his psychiatric evaluations, "Isn't the physical pain or even the rage. It's feeling the old me slipping away, bit by bit, and knowing I can't stop it. But if that's what it takes to save our people, I'll gladly let that man die." The war for Varion 7 was entering a new phase. The Kareth were about to learn that humans had their own monsters, ones that had been sleeping in their genes since before they walked upright. The only question was whether the price of victory would be worth the cost to their souls. Dawn broke over Red Valley, painting the sky in shades of purple and red that seemed to foretell the blood to come. Colonel Im Hyun-ki stood on a ridge overlooking the Kareth stronghold, his enhanced vision easily picking out the alien defensive positions in the dim light. Behind him, 200 Berserker soldiers waited in perfect stillness, their changed bodies nearly vibrating with contained energy. The Kareth had converted what was once the colony's largest mining facility into their main ground base. Their ships hung in the air above it like dark shadows, energy shields shimmering in the early morning light. Alien warriors patrolled the perimeter, their armor gleaming, weapons ready. "Remember the plan," Colonel Am's voice carried to his troops, deeper and more guttural than it had been before his transformation. "Hold the rage until my signal. We strike as one." Lieutenant Ryu He-jin, tasked with documenting the battle, positioned his reinforced cameras. His hands, like those of all the enhanced soldiers, had grown larger, stronger, with slightly longer fingers ending in thickened nails that more closely resembled claws. The Kareth noticed them first. Alarm sirens wailed across the valley as alien warriors rushed to their positions. Energy weapons powered up, and defensive shields sprang to life around key structures. The aliens had learned to fear these changed humans, but they still believed their superior technology would protect them. Colonel Im raised his hand. 200 Berserker soldiers tensed, their bodies beginning the change that came before combat. Muscles swelled, eyes darkened, and their breathing became deep and rhythmic, like the growl of predatory animals. The signal came. Im's hand dropped, and he released the roar that had been building in his chest. The sound was echoed by 200 throats, a primal cry that shook the very air. The Berserkers charge. The Kareth opened fire, their energy weapons turning the valley into a storm of deadly light. But the enhanced soldiers moved faster than the aliens could track, their toughened bodies shrugging off hits that would have vaporized normal humans. They crossed the ground between the ridge and the base in seconds, moving so quickly they left impact craters with each step. The first line of alien defenders died in a blur of violence. Lieutenant Ryu's cameras captured images that seemed impossible. Berserker soldiers tearing through energy shields with their bare hands, ripping apart alien armor like paper, moving so fast they appeared as little more than shadows. Colonel Im led the charge into the heart of the base. His massive fist punched through the reinforced wall of a bunker, and he pulled an alien warrior out through the hole. The Kareth's scream was cut short as Im's other hand closed around its throat. The aliens' orderly defense collapsed into chaos. Their weapons, designed to fight against other technological armies, proved nearly useless against enemies who could move faster than their targeting systems could track. The Berserkers fought like forces of nature, unstoppable, uncontrollable, and utterly devastating. A Kareth warship tried to provide air support, its main guns charging for a shot that would have leveled half the valley. Before it could fire, 20 Berserkers leaped from the ground, jumping higher than any human should be able to, and landed on its hull. They tore through the ship's armor with their bare hands, ripping open holes and pulling out vital components until the massive vessel crashed to the ground. Lieutenant Ryu's recording showed Berserkers using pieces of alien armor as improvised weapons, throwing them with enough force to penetrate other armor. They moved in ways that defy human limitations, their bodies twisted and changed by the rage of combat. Some ran on all fours like animals, while others made impossible leaps between buildings. The battle lasted less than 30 minutes. When it ended, the Kareth stronghold lay in ruins. Alien bodies and broken machinery littered the ground. Not a single enemy had survived the onslaught. But the aftermath was almost as disturbing as the battle itself. Lieutenant Ryu documented the Berserker soldiers as they struggled to come down from their combat high. Some paced in circles, still growling, their bodies refusing to return to their more human form. Others sat amid the destruction, staring at their blood-covered hands as if seeing them for the first time. Colonel An found himself standing in what had been the alien command center, his fists still clenched, his body trembling with residual anger. It took him several minutes to remember how to speak, to force words past the animalistic sounds that wanted to come out instead. "Secure the area," he managed finally, his voice rough and strange to his own ears. "Check for survivors," though he knew there wouldn't be any. The rage hadn't left room for mercy. Medical teams approached cautiously, led by Dr. Yu and his assistant Song Mei-Rei. They carried injections of the stabilizing agent, moving among the Berserker soldiers like handlers approaching dangerous animals. Some soldiers needed multiple doses before they could regain enough control to be transported back to base. Lieutenant Ryu's final recordings of the day showed the true cost of their victory. Enhanced soldiers being led away in restraints, not to contain them, but to help them remember who they were. Others sat in medical trucks, their changed faces wet with tears as their humanity slowly returned. The price of victory was written in more than alien blood. One of the younger Berserkers, barely 18 when he volunteered for the program, rocked back and forth in the medical transport, whispering, "I can still taste them. Why can I still taste them?" Colonel M made his report to command with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The Battle of Red Valley had been an overwhelming victory. The Kareth had lost a major stronghold and hundreds of their best warriors. But as he looked at his troops, at what they had become to achieve this victory, he wondered if they would ever find their way back to being fully human again. The sun set over Red Valley, turning the sky blood red once more. The Berserkers had proved themselves the perfect weapon against the alien invaders. But with each battle, the line between saving humanity and losing it became increasingly blurred. Dr. O. Minji stared at the monitor showing Sergeant Nam Gaita's brain activity, her concern deepening with each passing moment. The sergeant sat in the reinforced observation room beyond the glass, his massive hands clenched into fists, body trembling with suppressed emotion. Even sitting still, his enhanced form made the heavy steel chair look like children's furniture. "Tell me about the dreams again, Sergeant," she said softly into the microphone. The speakers carried her voice into the observation room, where Nam's enhanced hearing picked it up easily. "They're not dreams anymore," Nam replied, his voice rough and strained. "They're memories. I can smell the alien blood even when I'm awake. I can feel their bones breaking in my hands. Yesterday I crushed my coffee mug because I thought it was a Kareth throat." In her office down the hall, Dr. O reviewed similar reports from other enhanced soldiers. Private Lee had attacked a wall panel because its blinking lights reminded him of alien shield generators. Captain Bai had been found wandering the corridors at night, growling at shadows. Even the usually stable Major Kang had begun showing signs of deterioration. The doctor's latest report to command made for grim reading. The Berserker enhancement is proving increasingly difficult to control. The soldiers are experiencing more frequent episodes of involuntary transformation, triggered by increasingly minor stimuli. The psychological barriers between their combat and non-combat states are breaking down. A crash from the observation room interrupted her writing. Nam had overturned the steel table with a single swipe of his arm, his eyes beginning to darken with the onset of combat rage. Dr. O quickly pressed the alarm, and medical teams rushed in with stabilizing agents. "I can hear them," Nam roared, his voice losing its human qualities. "They're still out there. We need to hunt them down, tear them apart." It took 3 doses of the stabilizing agent before he collapsed, his body slowly returning to its more human form. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the Kareth were learning a new emotion: fear. Their commanders watched in horror as human soldiers shrugged off energy weapon hits that should have vaporized them, as their supposedly impenetrable armor was torn apart by bare hands. During one engagement, a Kareth officer's final transmission was intercepted. They're not soldiers anymore. They're demons. Their eyes, by the eternal void, their eyes. They're enjoying this. The transmission cut off in a spray of static and alien screaming. The aliens began abandoning forward positions at the first sign of Berserker forces. Their tactical retreats, once orderly and strategic, became increasingly panicked. Surveillance footage showed Kareth warriors, previously known for their stoic discipline, breaking formation and fleeing at the sound of human battle roars. But each victory came at a terrible price. Dr. O watched her patients slip further from their humanity with every engagement. The changes were subtle at first: increased aggression, difficulty maintaining normal conversations, preference for raw meat. Then came the more serious symptoms. Sergeant Nam's case was particularly troubling. Once a quiet, thoughtful man known for his skill with electronics, he now spent hours pacing his reinforced quarters, muttering about the sense of prey and the joy of the hunt. During one session, he told Dr. O, "The worst part is, I'm starting to forget why it should bother me. The killing, it feels right now natural. Like it's what we were always meant to do." The colony's leadership faced difficult decisions. The Berserker program was working. The Kareth were retreating, their invincible reputation shattered. But the cost to their own people was mounting. Dr. O's latest brain scans showed permanent changes in the enhanced soldiers' neural pathways. Areas governing higher reasoning were shrinking, while primitive regions associated with aggression and predatory behavior were expanding. During a particularly difficult therapy session, a young enhanced soldier broke down crying. "I can't remember my mother's face anymore," he sobbed, his transformed features twisting with grief. "But I can remember exactly how every alien I've killed smelled when they died. What's happening to us?" Dr. O worked tirelessly to develop new treatment protocols, but the enhanced soldiers' biology defied conventional medicine. Their bodies and minds had been changed at a fundamental level, awakening something that perhaps should have remained dormant in human DNA. The Kareth's fear of the Berserkers spread throughout their fleet. They began calling the enhanced humans, the awakened ones, in their communications, speaking of them with the same terror that ancient humans once spoke of monsters in the dark. But as the aliens' fear grew, so did the instability among the Berserker forces. During one memorable incident, an entire squad had to be sedated after they began hunting base personnel for sport, their minds lost in a shared combat rage that no amount of stabilizing agent could control. Dr. O's final report of that month was her most dire yet. "We're winning the war against the Kareth, but we're losing the soldiers we sent to fight it. The Berserker enhancement is consuming them, erasing their humanity piece by piece. Even if we achieve victory, I fear the price may be the souls of every enhanced soldier we've created." She looked through her observation window at Sergeant Nam, now sedated and restrained. His massive chest rose and fell with each breath, occasional growls escaping even in sleep. The man who had once enjoyed reading poetry and tending to the colony's gardens was fading away, replaced by something ancient and terrible that had been sleeping in human DNA for millions of years. The victory over the Kareth seemed closer with each passing day, but Dr. O couldn't help wondering, when the war was finally over, would there be anything left of their heroes to save? In the dimly lit command center of the Kareth flagship, Supreme Commander Vextar reviewed the casualty reports with growing horror. The numbers scrolled across his screen. 3,000 elite warriors lost, 15 capital ships destroyed, and dozens of ground bases overrun. His hands trembled as he prepared the emergency transmission to the High Command. Meanwhile, in the colony's command bunker, Colonel Lee Jinho studied the intercepted Kareth communications. The aliens' usually precise language had become frantic, filled with terms that the translation software struggled to interpret. Demons, monsters, ancient terrors. "They're breaking," Colonel Lee reported to the military council. "For the first time since they appeared, the Kareth are showing real fear." His own enhanced form filled the briefing room chair, which creaked under his weight despite being reinforced. The Kareth High Command initially dismissed Vextar's reports as combat hysteria. Then he sent them the video footage. The recording showed Berserker soldiers in action. Enhanced humans moving faster than their best tracking systems could follow, tearing through battleship armor with their bare hands, shrugging off weapons that should have vaporized them instantly. One particular recording captured the attention of the alien leadership. It showed a single Berserker soldier, clearly wounded and heavily outnumbered, decimating an entire Kareth strike team. The soldiers' movements were savage, primitive, more beast than human. The recording ended with the Berserker standing amid the carnage, roaring a challenge that shattered nearby windows. The first diplomatic message arrived unexpectedly. Colonel Lee was reviewing battle plans when his communications officer called him to the command center. The message was brief, transmitted on an open channel. "We seek dialogue. Terms may be discussed." The military council convened immediately. General Choi Won-shik, himself enhanced but still maintaining remarkable control, led the discussion. "This is unprecedented," he growled, his transformed voice echoing in the chamber. The Kareth have never negotiated in their 1,000-year expansion. Reports from the front lines added urgency to the debate. Dr. O's latest psychological evaluations showed the Berserker forces becoming increasingly unstable. Many enhanced soldiers could no longer speak in complete sentences, communicating through growls and gesture. Others had to be kept in containment between battles, their humanity slipping away more with each transformation. Major Kang, once the model of control among the enhanced soldiers, stood to address the council. His massive frame cast a shadow across the table as he spoke. "We can crush them now. Drive them not just from this world, but from this entire sector. Make them fear humans so deeply they'll never dare approach our colonies again." His eyes flickered with barely contained rage as he spoke. But Colonel Lee noticed something in Major Kang's speech, the slight slurring of words, the way his hands clenched and unclenched unconsciously. The Berserker change was affecting even their most stable officers. The debate continued for hours. Some council members argued for pushing their advantage, for using the Berserkers to inflict a defeat so devastating the Kareth would never recover. Others pointed to the human cost, the enhanced soldiers losing themselves bit by bit, victory purchased with the souls of their own people. Governor Han, attending via secure video link, spoke quietly but firmly. "We created these weapons to save our colony, not to become conquerors ourselves. If the Kareth are truly offering peace, we must consider it." Another Kareth transmission arrived during the debate. Supreme Commander Vextar himself spoke. "We acknowledge the power of your warriors. We offer immediate withdrawal from your space, recognition of your territorial claims, and reparations for damage caused. We ask only that you contain your weapons." The word weapons in the Kareth language carried a special meaning, something to be feared and respected. Colonel Lee noted that their translation software had initially rendered it as forces of nature. As if to emphasize the cost of continuing the war, alarms blared through the base. 3 enhanced soldiers had lost control in the barracks, their minds slipping into combat rage without any trigger. It took multiple teams with heavy sedatives to subdue them. Dr. O's voice shook as she delivered her report to the council. "We're losing them faster than ever. The transformations are becoming permanent in some cases. If we don't find a way to reverse the process soon, there may not be any humans left in those bodies to save." The council's decision would shape not just the future of Varion 7, but perhaps the future of human-Kareth relations for generations to come. Victory was within their grasp, but victory at what price? The Berserkers had saved their colony, but each passing day turned their saviors more into the monsters that Kareth believed them to be. Colonel Lee looked around the council table at his fellow officers. Some, like him, were enhanced, their changed forms a testament to what they'd sacrificed for victory. Others were still human, watching their transformed colleagues with a mixture of gratitude and fear. The next transmission they sent to the Kareth would either begin the peace process or signal the start of a war of extinction. As Colonel Lee prepared to cast his vote, He wondered if the galaxy was big enough for both species to live in peace, and if the Berserkers could ever find peace themselves. The Plains of Serenity lived up to their name one last time as dawn broke over the battlefield. Morning mist clung to the ground, hiding the scars of previous battles. Major Kang stood at the front of the Berserker line, his enhanced senses already picking up the approach of the Kareth forces. Behind him, 200 transformed soldiers waited. They were the last of their kind. No new volunteers had been accepted into the program after the psychological damage became clear. Many could no longer speak, communicating only in growls and gestures. Even Major Kang felt his own grip on humanity slipping with each passing hour. The Kareth attack came without warning. Their ships burst through the clouds, weapons blazing, in one final attempt to take the colony. They had broken the peace talks, hoping to catch the humans off guard. Instead, they found the Berserkers waiting. Major Kang's roar signaled the start of battle. The sound carried across the plains, a primal cry that sent shivers through both human and alien forces. The Berserkers charged forward, their bodies shifting further from human as the combat rage took hold. The battle that followed would be remembered as both glorious and terrible. Kareth weapons fire lit up the morning sky, while Berserker warriors leaped impossible distances to tear into enemy ships. Major Kang led from the front, his massive form cutting through alien ranks like a force of nature. Dr. Yu watched from the command bunker, recording everything for future study. He saw Captain Bai tear the wing off a Kareth fighter with his bare hands, using it as a club against ground forces. Sergeant Nam, who could no longer remember his own name, moved so fast the cameras could barely track him. The Kareth fought with the desperation of a species facing extinction. Their weapons had improved, specifically designed to combat the Berserkers, but it wasn't enough. Nothing could stop the enhanced humans once their battle rage took hold. 6 hours later, it was over. The Plains of Serenity were anything but serene, littered with the wreckage of alien ships and the bodies of those who had fought their last battle. The surviving Kareth fled the system, their retreat marked by panic rather than military precision. The victory came at a terrible cost. Many Berserkers couldn't come down from their combat state. They prowled the battlefield for days, hunting for enemies that were no longer there. Dr. Yu and his team worked tirelessly to develop a way to reverse the transformation. In his laboratory, surrounded by medical equipment and research data, Dr. Yu finally had a breakthrough. A combination of genetic therapy and psychological treatment showed promise in helping the enhanced soldiers regain their humanity. The recovery process was slow and painful. Captain Ba was among the first to undergo the treatment. His body gradually returned to something closer to human, though he would always be larger and stronger than normal. His mind was harder to heal. Memories of the war haunted him, and he sometimes woke up roaring in the night. Major Kang's recovery was particularly difficult. He had led the Berserkers in too many battles, gone too deep into the rage too many times. Even after treatment, he preferred to live alone in the colony's outskirts, where his occasional lapses into animal behavior wouldn't frighten others. 2 years after the final battle, Governor Han stood before the gathered colonists to dedicate the memorial. The black stone monument rose from the center of the colony, bearing the names of all who had served in the Berserker program, both those who fell and those who survived, but were never quite the same. The inscription, "To those who sacrificed their humanity to preserve ours," glinted in the sunlight. Dr. Yu stood in the crowd, watching as former Berserker soldiers approached the monument. Some walked normally, successfully recovered. Others moved with the too fluid grace of their enhanced forms, their transformations never fully reversed. The Kareth never returned to human space. Stories of the Berserkers spread through their empire, becoming almost mythological. They spoke of demons in human form, of warriors who could not be killed, of a species that had found a way to unleash its darkest nature in defense of its people. Dr. O's final psychological report became required reading at military academies throughout human space. It served as both a testament to human determination and a warning about the costs of victory at any price. The Berserker program was officially classified, locked away in secure archives. But its legacy lived on in the changed bodies and minds of its survivors, in the nightmares that woke them screaming, in the moments when their eyes would darken with memories of battle rage. Years later, a reporter asked Major Kang if the victory had been worth the price. The old soldier, his face still bearing the marks of his transformation, was quiet for a long time before answering. "We saved our people," he said finally, his voice still carrying a hint of its inhuman growl. "But sometimes, in my dreams, I'm still human. Those are the nights I wake up crying." The plains of Serenity gradually healed, grass covering the scars of battle. The colony flourished, its people living in peace, but they never forgot the cost of that peace, or the men and women who had given up their humanity to secure it. And on quiet nights, when the mist rolled across the plains, some said they could still hear distant roars, the echoes of warriors who had become legends, of humans who had awakened something ancient and terrible within themselves to save everything they loved.